I definitely want to continue on the topic of iOS 14 and 14.5 updates, which were
Mhm.
absolutely the highlights of the advertising world in
Yeah.
2021 and 2022. So we've all experienced the issues that came with it. However, almost nobody from my experience truly understands what's happening between Apple and what Apple actually did. So can you explain it just technically? What
Yeah.
exactly is going on? Because like I'm even seeing 7, 8, even 9-figure business people that don't really understand what's going on.
Yeah, it's pretty simple what's happening, and for us too, like I'm trying to educate people on as much as possible because there are ways around it. There are ways to really improve ads, even though this is happening. So essentially, there's something called an IDFA, which is an identifier for advertisers that Apple is basically giving. It's basically a unique random ID that's assigned to Apple devices. Now what they did is Apple launched something called ATT. So that's they're basically their transparency tracking, right? So application tracking transparency. So ATT. So essentially, what they did is they gave users the option to opt out of app tracking. So, basically when that update came out, the first thing people saw is a pop up like, hey, like, these apps are tracking, your device. Do you want to block them? And believe it or not, I mean, 96% of US users, they opted in to, well, I'm sorry, they opted out of app tracking,
Yeah,
right?
so that they can be tracked.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so they opted out of app tracking. And so when that happened, Apple stopped sharing the IDFA, so the identifier,
Mhm.
with Facebook. And Facebook had, and there's a lot of good stuff on this online. If you look into the IDFA and do a little deeper for any listeners, um, Facebook basically was probably spent 7-8 years just building their entire tracking mechanism based off that, right? So they kind of went all in on that, and when this happened, it was a huge shock. So at first, there was an immediate decline. It went from like 85, 90% being tracked in there to like 40, 50%. And, you know, sometimes it was just attributing to the wrong ad set and ad, and that's still
Mhm.
going on now. But
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
that's essentially what happened. And this is not just affecting Facebook anymore. I mean, this is affecting TikTok. This is affecting other platforms. So I mean, it's really if depending on how the ad platform was dependent on using the IDFA for tracking is what has impacted. It impacted the ad network the most, and obviously that was the case for Facebook.
Okay. Well, that's quite interesting. And is if somebody opts out from being tracked, is there any way possible to be tracked? Is there any, because there's so many like quote unquote conspiracies out there that Facebook is using way more mechanisms to be tracking you. So is Facebook continuing in any other way officially to be tracking you outside of that?
Well, what they're doing, so they know who views their ads, right? I mean,
Mhm. Yeah.
obviously, because that's just like product analytics on their side. Like they know who is viewing ads. So what they did, and that's why what basically I'll start with there. What they did first is they changed the attribution window. So before it was all
Mhm.
click through, right? So
Yeah.
if somebody would click through, that was like the conversion, and that was the way that everybody was used to. That's the way so many brands scaled their scaled up, was because it was click through attribution. So when somebody's clicking through, right, and they buy, or an event occurs. And what happened is they changed now to view through attribution. So if somebody views the ad, and then there's a purchase and they receive it back through the conversion API, or even the browser event, then they can, like a page load, they know that person bought. But essentially, like the view through attribution, it's not beneficial because what's happening is, and other platforms are adopting this too. If you get like 1,000 purchases right now, let's say like in a month, you may have Facebook now over reporting in some cases. It's not always just under reporting. There's cases where it's over reporting now for whatever reason because they're trying to take credit from purchases that happen from other ad platforms.
Mhm.
TikTok is doing kind of a similar thing, but TikTok is more on the side of just like under attributing more than over. But Facebook now is you're seeing, and there's waves of it. Some weeks there's like waves of over reporting, so they're definitely testing stuff. It just depends. It also just depends on your store or your website, and technicalities there. But yeah, that's essentially what's happening. And personally, like if you're optimizing your ads, for me personally, I prefer click through attribution because that's the exact ad that generated that result.
And that's only being tracked because of the conversion API and not because of anything else.
Yeah. So here's for you're saying just for Facebook
Yeah,
itself.
if we're just speaking about Facebook today.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah. So the conversion API is essentially like it's taking the first party data on the site, right? So on like
Mhm.
on let's say like for instance, let's look at just like the native Shopify Facebook, um, the native Facebook conversion API, right? So like when
Mhm.
you're setting up and you select Facebook and like a Shopify store backend,
Yeah.
essentially what you're doing is you're just sharing that data back to the back to through using the Facebook conversion API, sending that purchase data back or the add to cart, initiate checkout, that kind of stuff, right? And that's great, but at the end of the day, so Facebook like knows like at that point like kind of who's purchasing it's still though they're blocked by a couple of different things that we'll get into, um, because Shopify reporting is not always picking up everything, and you
Yeah.
see a lot of direct visits or direct purchases on there, and that's because even Shopify is struggling to determine where that's from, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But essentially, the conversion API, even if like Facebook is receiving data, right? If a user opted out of app tracking that purchased, they are not allowed to show the advertiser that result, right? So, they may know that, and there's no information on if there's speculation, but there's no like valid information on if they are using that data to optimize. Um, so yeah, I mean, at the end of the day here, it just comes back to um, you know you can see it in the events manager, right? What they're doing, but you're not actually able to determine, um, if Facebook is actually optimizing based off of it, right?
And you can only speculate whether that's happening or not
Exactly.
at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's tough to speculate.
Yeah, well, the job for every e-commerce advertiser has become way tougher because of all of this. Who wins from all of this? Do you think that there's a
Well,
winner from all of this?
well, I think, I think society overall. I mean, people aren't going to be being tracked, by Facebook like that. But at the end of the day, like, I don't really know if anybody wins.
Mhm.
I mean, I think it's whatever the regulations are, like in Europe, GDPR stuff,
Or yeah,
however that plays out. But like, it's not even that. It's tough. I really don't think there's a winner. I really do believe though that whoever is going to take advantage of tools out there, and investing time and money into um, making sure you're optimizing your ads based off accurate data, those are going to be the winners because it's still possible to succeed right now. The only way you're not going to is if you rely on the native ads manager data. So, I mean, again, yeah, because there are a lot of people that are successfully tracking, right? It's just you have to you have to take the time to understand it, learn it, and get it implemented.